Well, welcome everybody. My name is Bill Miller, and thank you for coming to our presentation. I will actually, I'm going to do, while we wait for people to come in for the first couple minutes, I'm going to try and do a poll. Where my polls go? There we go. No such luck. Let's try that again. There we go. Can you see a poll now?
Yep.
Question is, when you are or will be absent, faculty are required to notify their dean. If you have an absence, who would fill out your absence report in employee self-service? Me or myself, my dean and administrative assistant. Because this was, while we were putting this presentation together, this was one of the things that started me to think that we should talk more about the whole absence report process, and that's sort of how we got to this presentation today, was just broadening information about absences and how to report them and what they are, especially in light of the fact that there's been some contract changes. And we'll give you, looks like we got 13 of 18 people, which is most of you. So give you another 30 seconds. This is my first ever poll, by the way, on Zoom, so I'm excited. And I think what we're seeing is that there is a difference of how things are done in different divisions, perhaps. That's sort of one of the things I found in my poking around to get ready for this, is that some divisions, the dean and administrative assistant do it. Some divisions, the people do it themselves. And just to let you know, in my division, typically, it is the dean and my dean and my administrative assistant who fill out absence reports. In fact, we have a whole form that we then give to them to fill out. But interesting. So actually, more people. Well, I guess it's split between me and some people who don't know, and my dean and administrative assistant. So thank you. And so another thing I'll say, actually, just let me share my screen here for the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Yeah, very interesting. I just shared the results, I think. Good. All right. So again, my name is Bill Miller. I teach chemistry here at Sacramento City College. I'm working on this. I've worked on this presentation, and co-presenting with me will be Michael Henderson, our CFT Executive Director.
Hi, folks.
Yes. He's been very helpful in putting this together and in many things. And just like to say, if you have any questions, he's a great resource. Even though he's relatively new, but he's a great resource. There's the poll that we just did. And I'd like to just touch base about your LRCFT team. I've got the LRCFT officers, Jason Newman, President, Stephanie Rowe, Treasurer, and Belinda Lum, Chief Negotiations Officer. Then our Sacramento City College team, Belinda, Katie, Kathleen Carberry, Katie, Joe Forelli, Rebecca Goodchild, who's here, I know, and Jacqueline Vargas Niate. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And then there's Michael Henderson and Reina Mayorga. And I think very highly of all these people, and I'm happy to work with them. And at the bottom, it says, email your LRCFT team with questions about today's presentation or any workplace condition. That's what they're there for, and I know that I certainly do that too. Here's an overview of today's presentation. So we had our poll. We're next going to talk about how do I know how much of each leave I have, focusing specifically on the 3 types of leave in the title: sick leave, personal necessity, and personal business. Who has them? How much people have. Then we'll talk about general conditions for all paid leaves. And then we'll go into the specific types for each of those 3 types. And then some more things to say about them. And I just want to point out, Michael is looking at the chat, and if you have a question, please go ahead and ask it, and we'll do our best to answer it. Anything we can't answer, we'll do research on and figure out. This has been a great learning process for me about the contract and about these types of leaves, although there's certainly things I still have to figure out. So, well, then let's jump right in about figuring out how much of each leave do I have, and we'll start with sick leave. And for sick leave, you should see the bottom of your pay stub. You'll see a little section that looks something like this. In particular, we've got sick leave right here. And I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, what the temporary sick leave is and how I have negative of it so far. But one thing I figured out is that, so this is a pay stub from last month. And so this is a fall semester pay stub. And for fall semester, it has your sick leave that will occur for the fall and spring semesters. For faculty, there with multiple banks of sick leave, and there are 3 types of sick leave. There are sick leave for the full-time faculty who are during fall and spring. There's a sick leave bank for overload, and there's a sick leave bank for when you teach during the summer. And that also goes for as part-time faculty, adjunct faculty. They have a fall, spring sick leave bank, and they also have a summer sick leave bank. And what you can do is when you get, so if you're full-time faculty, you'll get a separate check for your overload pay, and that overload pay, or that overload pay stub, will have your overload sick leave on it. When you get a summer paycheck, that will have your summer sick leave on it. And so you can go into employee self-service. They have all of your pay stubs in there. And if you haven't done that afterwards, I'd be happy to show you how to do that for a couple reasons. You can do your apps, you can see your absence reports in there as well. So how do I know how much of each leave I have? You have to check that particular type of pay stub. That's what I've learned putting this presentation together. And that was sick leave. Now it's going to personal necessity leave. This is Article 9.4.1.1 from the contract. And that is, there are 6 days of accrued sick leave may be used for personal necessity, as personal necessity leave, I should say. And as far as who has personal necessity leave, that is tenured, tenure track faculty, LTTs, which are long-term temporary faculty, and adjunct faculty as well. So this is something that all 3 of those categories have. And it is a way to use sick time for other purposes than you being sick. And a note here, if you don't have any, so you have to have sick time to be able to use personal necessity time. And that should say any there. But so to get your sick days, you have to also have sick time. Okay. Then personal business leave, how much of that do, well, so that is only, unfortunately, for tenured and tenure track faculty. And it is 2 days per academic year. And it is not from sick time. It is use it or lose it. And you can use it or not, or you can only use it during fall or spring semesters and not during summer. We'll talk about what all these different, how to use each of them, but this is just an idea about how much you have and which faculty groups get them. Now let's go and talk about some general conditions for all paid leaves. This is from Article 9.2. So, this is for more than just the leaves that we're talking about. that you must notify your appropriate area dean as faculty. And documentation can be required for any absence. So this is in the contract, and documentation is required for any absence in excess of 10 days. Maybe I can just check in with Michael here. I haven't heard about, or I haven't had any absences less than 10 days where documentation was requested, but it has happened, Michael, or it can happen?
Not to my knowledge. I assume it's happened just because the place has been around so long and there are so many faculty. I assume it has happened. Under the contract, it can happen. The contract allows the administration to require or to demand a documentation for any absence, even one below 10 days. My assumption, and as far from talking to some people about this, is that for the most part, they don't do that. If you take a few days off sick, no one's going to be asking you. But I imagine that if you got into the habit of taking the same day off every week for, a couple of months or something, someone might start getting suspicious and saying, hey, I'd like to know why you're off every Tuesday sick or something.
Right.
So
why are you sick every Monday?
Right. So theoretically, it would be good to have some evidence, but it seems that it's never asked for unless somebody gives them a reason to ask if it's below 10 days.
Yeah, thank you. And the last note here, gainful employment is not allowed while on paid leave. Although I don't know if that's ever come up either, but.
Right. It's one of those things it's hard to keep track of, especially if the employment is away from Los Rios, right?
Yes. Two other things that I thought were interesting, and I'm sure there's more in the contract, but in this, and I think this is new in this contract, is that you may charge illnesses due to mental health, mental illness, and physical injury. And I think it just said in previous contracts, you just have to be sick. It didn't call out these categories, but and then 9.3.7, you may bring sick leave you earned from other California public school districts to Los Rios. And I think that's also, something's new about that too. But if you have, go ahead.
There was a limitation previously that you had to do that within, you had to have joined Los Rios within a year of leaving your previous school district. That no longer applies. And that's not a change in our contract. That's actually a change in state law.
Perfect. Thank you. More specifics about sick leave. So 10-month full-time employees earn 10 days per year or 1 day per month. And adjunct part-time employees earn sick time in proportion to the ratio of their work hours to full-time employment. And this table here is actually not from the contract. It is from the certificated absence report handbook that the district puts out to help administrative assistants fill out absence reports, or anybody who's filling out an absence report too. And you can see that different faculty accrue the amount of sick leave, or 1 day per month is different for different groups of faculty, and for adjunct, overload, and summer faculty as well, which again is something I learned as I did this. So let's go into some specifics about personal necessity leave. So 6 days can be used. This might contradict what I said earlier. It says including summer. Anyway, so I apologize. So this is the directly out of contract. It's not, and that was from 9.4.1.1. Then, whenever possible, it must be submitted in advance. My take on that is that whenever possible, it's not always possible, but cases like when you use personal necessity leave, say for religious observances, those are fairly easy to see in advance. And so now, as far as advance approval not required, of course, death or illness of immediate family members, anything that you can't foresee, for example. And these are all things that you can use personal necessity for. And then we're not going to say too much about it, although if you have questions, we can do our best to answer them. So personal necessity can be used to supplement critical illness, judicial appearance, and bereavement leave in particular, which is a good one to know about.
James, you go see Mr. James.
Is there a question?
I'm not sure. I think that might have been somebody accidentally unmuted or something. Just can I just add one last thing to the point you made about personal necessity there, Bill? That for those of you, if you have a copy of the LRCFT contract, which is available on our website, there's a section near the back of it called the short-term leaves matrix, and page 225 of the contract actually lists some examples of personal necessity leave, both approval and denial examples that give you some sense of the boundaries of the leave. These are not exhaustive, they're just examples, but it's a good place to start if you're wondering about, does unplanned childcare qualify? Yes, it does. Does a home repair qualify? No, it doesn't, if it's a non-emergency repair, so there's some examples there. They're not exhaustive, but they will help. And if you ever ask for a personal necessity leave for something that you believe should be covered and you're denied, then talk to one of your LRCFT reps on campus or get in touch with us in the office.
Definitely. Yeah, no, and we'll show that matrix towards the end of the presentation.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, Bill,
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
No worries. Yeah, no, because we'll cover more about that. So there is a provision, sorry, I think I skipped it back here. There's a provision about using personal necessity for death or illness of an immediate family member and imminent danger of an immediate family member. And I want to talk about what that is, because I think that has been updated more recently in the new contract. And here's the list of immediate family members. It's a significant group, though it does not include everybody. And so please take a look at that. I probably won't read it. But then in addition to this, an immediate family member is one designated person of the employee. And I've already received questions about this and helped somebody about it. And you get to designate the person. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, is that when you tell the person, when you tell your dean, notify them that you're doing something for your self-designated person, that you then just say, this is my person that I'm going to have.
Right. There's no official form or anything for which to write the person on, but yeah, it's just letting them know that this is my designated person under that part of the contract and that provision of the government code.
Exactly. So, so who is not an immediate family member? Well, let's say this: unless they are your designated person. So nieces, nephews, best friend, cousins. I know some people are pretty close with their cousins, and yet they're not on the list of immediate family members. But one person who is not on the list can be, which I think is. I think that's also that's also a law.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
So, so personal necessity is what we're talking about, but because personal necessity can be used to supplement other leaves, this designated person affects, and because the designated person can be used directly, I think, for bereavement leave too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
that's
right. Yeah, very important, I think. Now let's go on and talk about some specifics about personal business leave. And again, this is for tenure track, not LTT, and not including LTT employees or adjunct or part-time faculty. You get 2 days per calendar year. Hold on. Yes, this is the one, I'm sorry, that can only be used during fall and summer, not the personal necessity can be used all year.
Yeah.
And as Michael told me in prepping for this, both days can be used in one semester, so you don't have to spread them out. And when we show the matrix towards the end, you'll see that personal care actually is on some of the forms and not on some of the others that I've seen, some of the matrices and some of the information from the district. Personal care is a new one that personal business can be used for. Other cases that have been in previous contracts, such as child's school or meeting, scheduled home repair, things like that. And in general, they're for things that need to be done during the workday or during what might be called business hours by some, and that can conflict with classes that you're holding. And here, you have to tell your administrator or your dean in general that personal business leave will be taken. Advance notification is expected. And this is what's one of the things that's interesting to me about personal business is that, as far as I know, there's no documentation requirement and there's no approval needed. And that's right, Michael? Is that just?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So you're sort of telling your dean that you're taking it for any of the reasons, including personal care. And then, however, you assume, and this is from the contract, you assume the responsibility to meet all professional obligations, including presenting material missed as a result of the absence. So personal business time does not have subs because you're taking that time, but you're still doing your regular job. And personal business in particular, so I wasn't on the last negotiation, but I was on two negotiations for the contract, 2 negotiations ago, the teams for negotiating. And one of the things that came out was that faculty are not using personal business leave very much. And my understanding of why I wasn't using it was because I didn't understand it. So hopefully here's a little more information for you so that it makes a little more sense. And again, as Michael said, if you have any questions about using it, definitely let us know. And
Can I just interrupt with a couple of things from the chat here? First of all, Laurie says personal business. It says calendar year. Does that mean academic year? I think we might have accidentally left calendar year into the presentation. Did we? Can you go back a screen or two? Yeah, that's actually academic year. I think we might have missed that. It is academic year, Laurie. In fact, the contract itself explicitly says academic year, and it says also explicitly that it's available to regular faculty during the fall and spring semesters only.
Thank you, Laurie.
Josephine also asks, does a child school field or award, etc. count? I assume you mean field trip or something there. That's, I would think so. I mean, so for example, one of the approval examples given for personal business in the leaves matrix is a child's school meeting / appointment. And I think, you know, a reasonable person would interpret your question to fall into that.
Well, and I think, Michael, too, maybe this is part of the answer, is that when you tell your administrator, your dean, that you're taking it, you tell them, I'm going to a child's school meeting /
Right, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
you don't say, I'm going to a field trip. You don't let them interpret anything. You give them exactly what the contract says, because that's what it is, right?
Right, yep.
Yeah. Any other questions that you're saying?
Yeah, the personal, Laurie asked, personal business. If you cannot have a sub, that means you'd cancel class as your only option for instructional faculty. Bill, you're instructional faculty, so you probably are better at answering that one than I am.
Yeah, so what you're supposed to do is you're responsible for presenting the material. So one idea would be maybe yes, you're canceling class, I think, and then you're having the material made up in perhaps a later lecture. I think we said that it's not so. I mean, sometimes I think you can accomplish things via potentially out of class assignments.
Right. And if you had a video lecture from a previous online class you'd done, you could post that to make sure they get some of the material they've missed. It's essentially up to you, I think. But yes, the bottom line answer to your question, Laurie, is that you would cancel that class meeting, or at the very least that you wouldn't be there. And I guess really you don't want the students in the classroom if you're not there anyway. So that is pretty much your option for instructional faculty, I think.
Another idea too is potentially for office hours, there is no material missed. So
Right.
if you're to take personal business there, it's not so much of an issue. Any other questions, or if not, so I'll keep going. So I think I just mocked this up example of notifying your administrator. Devin Horton is my administrator. So and I think it just has to be this simple. I mean, or, just make sure, personally, I just make sure that I put something that's on the list, and then there can be, as far as I understand, no questions about it. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, and if they question it and you think they're wrong, then again, come to us.
Right. Exactly.
Question, I don't know if I can ask it now or should wait till the end.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Hi, everybody. How does it work if you're teaching a lab course where your students, by the accreditation standards, require that you have so many lab hours that you're delivering instruction? If you have to make that material up, do you have to come in and give your students alternative lab time that you're instructing them?
Oh, gee,
That's a
I
good
don't
question.
know. Any of the scientists in here help us out? I mean, do these lab minimum times for a semester, for example, like what if a student misses one class, for example? Can they miss one lab over the course of a semester?
It depends on how many hours of instruction. They're allowed to miss up to 6%. But I guess the language says if you take personal business, it's your responsibility to make that up. So my question is, if you take personal business during a lab, is it your responsibility to make that lab up for your pot of students?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could be required to actually. I mean, one of the difficulties there is that even if the faculty member were to do that, it's hard to require the students to come in at some other time, right? They might have another class, they might have work, they've already done their schedule. I am honestly not quite sure how to confront that. I mean, and I will take that down as something to look into, and we will circle back with you, Melissa, and we'll try and find an answer here. I don't know, Bill, do you have any
Yeah, no. So, and I'm trying to think what we would do in chemistry lab, and I mean, we don't have an accreditation standard around our hours, and I'm not so. I mean, I think if we miss a lab, then we would not make it up potentially. Like if I got sick, even if it wasn't personal business, sometimes if you get sick at the last minute, you can't find a sub to make it up, and so the class gets missed. I mean, I guess my first thought would be hopefully it's not that tight that one lab throws you're worried about missing your accreditation, but maybe it is, in which case
Yeah, I think it just depends. Like, let's say that lab is injections for ASA, MSA, PSA, or it's a day of sealants, like that's that dedicated day of instruction, and it's hard to make that up at another time. But it seems like the language says it's your responsibility to make it up for what you miss. So my question is, if it's a lab, do you have to make that up?
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure on the definitive answer to that. I think one maybe not very good answer, but one workaround is the fact that most things that qualify for personal business leave are things that people generally schedule in advance. And so the idea would be, I think, that you try and schedule personal business leave at least to fall on classes where these sort of obligations don't occur. I know that might not be a completely satisfying answer, but that might be one way to get around it. Some of the examples given in the matrix are things like a legal appointment, a meeting with a tax preparer or other financial business. Some might be harder to reschedule, like a parent-teacher conference. Sometimes schools don't give you too many options for those. But I don't have a firm answer about that. I mean, from a union point of view, in some respects, I would argue that you have a right to take the leave, period. But the contract does also say you have to, make up the make up the class, and that example's a little unusual. Yeah, I will ask about that. I'll look into that a little bit with the district too.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you
maybe
very
a couple
much.
more things I can add, which would be, I like that idea of shuffling around labs. Like if I had to lab, there are days that are less important and days that are more important. So make sure we cover all the important stuff first, or shuffle them around so you do. And then I think maybe the broader idea is, as long as you meet accreditation standards, as long as you meet your student learning outcomes, if you do, even you cannot deliver a lab and still meet your professional obligations, right? While still missing a lab. I mean, I know in our syllabi that students are allowed to miss one lab throughout the semester, and still and essentially with no penalty, right? So to help accommodate their absences and illnesses. So
Yeah. So I appreciate it, because we have ratios where we have, 5 students to a teacher. So if you're taking personal business and you're planning ahead and it lands on that day, then would you take your 5 students, and if it's a test that day, test them on, make it up on your own time, because it seems like the language says you're making up your material.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. It does.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah. So we were talking about this personal business, about how you are more or less advising your dean that you are taking it, and so this would be a nice template. Yeah. Now, other things about these leaves, before you take a leave, so whether it's sick leave, personal business, or personal necessity, make sure that you have time in the correct bank. If you don't, you can lose pay. And in particular, how would I, or how do you check if you have personal necessity? That's PN, personal business, PB time. Go into, and this goes for all absences actually, but you can go into employee self-service, absence reporting, which it sounds like many of you who are filling out your own absence reports already do this on a regular basis. There's a place called absence time history that you can click on, and you can input a date range to see all of your absences that have been reported. And they should be classified by type of leave: sick leave, personal necessity, personal business. No absences reported means that you have your full allotment so far. And again, if anybody wants to stick around afterwards to have me show them how to do that, I'm happy to show you how to do that too. And if you do not have the correct amount of leave and you do then lose pay, be careful, because if you lose more than 3 days of pay per academic year, then you will not advance a step on the salary schedule that year, or that semester anyway, whenever you would normally advance. And that, although I think if I understand this correctly, you may advance at mid-year up the step when you have one more complete, because basically you don't have a full year of service to the district. And I guess I don't know, I forgot to check into this, how that affects STRS too.
Yeah.
I can check on that if people want, but I don't have that info right now.
Right.
And then if you use sick or personal necessity leave, you are not responsible for finding a sub. You can get a sub, and it may be in your best interest to find a sub, but you don't have to. I would say focus on taking care of yourself, or the person you're taking care of on personal necessity leave. It would be nice if you could find a sub, but not at all required.
Absolutely, yeah. And if your dean or someone says to you, you know, you can't take this time until you find someone to replace you, that's just no good. And get in touch with us.
Get in touch with us. That's right. All right, now here is the matrix that's in the back of the contract that shows some examples of personal necessity, details about it, even some hours for some of the different groups of faculty, approval examples, and denial examples as well, including, you can use personal necessity. You can do child school meeting or appointment. I think when we show the personal business, you can also do that as well. I'll give you a minute to just read over this and look at it. This is in the back of your contract too. And if anybody has any questions about it, please let us know. Katie, yes.
I have a question. It kind of seems like a lot of things could be either personal necessity or personal business, like depending on how you put it. But personal business is better, right? Because it doesn't come out of your sick leave, and personal necessity does.
Absolutely.
So basically, as long as you have the personal business leave, you should try to use that first.
That's our idea. Yes.
Okay, yeah. And then when you're using the personal business leave, it's in units of days. So how does that work? Is it just any amount of hours that you have scheduled on that day, or is it 4 hours like it would be with the sick leave?
Which one are you asking about, Katie? Personal business?
Yeah, personal
Yeah,
business.
no, it is calculated in hours. So depending on what your schedule is, you might actually be able to take more than 2 actual days, or you might be able to take multiple part days, depending on how many hours you're actually missing. But yes, it's, and for classroom faculty, it's calculated at 8 hours for 2 business days.
Okay, so could the person take 3 personal business days if it was less than 8 hours?
Yes, absolutely. That's our position, at least. That
Yes.
it's and in fact, the matrix there, you can see it there where Bill is circling his arrow. Can use the increments of even less than an hour according to the details there.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, so now here's the personal business, and then in the next page is going to be a comparison of the two. And so there's the different things you can use. So here PRN is personal necessity and PRB is personal business. And you can see what you can use. Yeah, there's definitely overlap, and definitely our idea is that since you personal business is use it or lose it, use it, please, and talk to us before you try and use it if you have any questions. There have been some cases where people have tried to use these kinds of leaves and been denied. And we don't want that to happen, but when it does, please come and see us and we'll make sure that we do our best to have it work, have it follow the contract, of course.
There's a question in the chat, Bill. There's what about child's college graduation, and if it is out of state, travel is required? Well, that would definitely qualify, I think, under personal necessity. In fact, on the matrix, graduation ceremonies are part of the list of approved things. It does say high school graduation, middle school or high school or elementary. I'm not sure why, for example, a college graduation would be sort of not okay. It's not listed in the yes, but it's also not listed in the no. So I would say yes, a graduation is fine. If you have to travel out of state, obviously that's going to take you more time. Under personal necessity, you have six days that you can use for that. Personal business might be a little more difficult, although a child's school meeting or appointment, I'm not sure what they would say about a graduation for that. Yeah, if it's during a time during business that you can't be reasonably expected to accomplish during non-duty times, I guess that it probably should as well. And yeah, it's the problem here is that these matrices, by the way, this matrix that Bill is showing you, even though it's part of the contract, these are sort of pretty old, and we didn't revise them very much in the recent. We revised a couple of things in the recent negotiations, and I think maybe it would be a good idea for us to try next time around to add more examples to help people out. It never hurts to ask in advance if you're at all sort of concerned about it.
Although, so this is something too that I wanted to point out, and is that there are cases where your dean can approve it and it gets to human resources at the district level,
Right.
and it doesn't get approved. So ideally, if you have a question, or if you talk to us, we may end up asking district. That's not always, and I know sometimes deans can want to approve. I've heard cases of the deans wanting to approve leaves that maybe they shouldn't, and then it gets to the district and it gets rejected, and that's how you can lose pay too, is you think you're approved at the dean level, but then somehow it doesn't meet the proper description here. So just so hopefully that
Can I just
the
add
whole
something
point
to
of
that,
this.
Bill?
What's that?
Can I just add something to that? That can be why, if you're a little unsure up front, it's a good idea to ask, because in the short time I've been here, for a couple of people, I have had cases where they have had not leaves, but other sort of contractually related requests turned down by the district. And in a couple of those cases where I've been able to show the district that they were told beforehand by their deans that they could do this, I was also able to make the argument to the district that faculty should be able to rely on information they get from their administrators. So even if this is not allowed by the contract, we should make an exception in this case because their dean told them yes. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that would be successful every single time, but I've had it work a couple of times in the last few months.
Yes, excellent point. Thank you. Yeah. And with that, so that's the end of our presentation. Thank you all for coming. We'd be happy to take any more questions you have. We've already had some great questions. And hopefully you've got a little more knowledge about these types of leaves. Thank you.
I feel like I've never used any kind of leave except sick leave, and I'm still like not sure that I can. I feel like, once you go into the district's labyrinth of requirements, it starts to get really confusing. I came in a few minutes late, so I don't know if I'm supposed to fill out my own absence report, but in my division, I don't do that. Someone else does it for us, and it's kind of like, I just assume it's getting done, according to whatever the rules are, but I'm looking at this matrix thing and it says I can take time off for self-care for personal business leave, but then it says I can't I have to do it in a way that could not be reasonably expected to be accomplished during non-duty times.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That's confusing.
Yeah, well, the self-care for us, I think the self-care thing now is pretty much absolute. If you say you need time off for self-care, then it qualifies. And that's something that was, I think, added like in the most recent recent negotiations. So I told you, I wasn't in the leaves subgroup that sort of negotiated that, but that was added in the recent negotiations, and we see it now as basically a catch-all if you want to take your PB personal business leave and you don't actually have a home repair or a legal appointment or something like that. So
everybody needs time off for self-care, I think.
Yeah.
So should the people, when they request that, should they put in the request that it's time off for self-care that can't be expected to be accomplished during non-duty times, just to make sure the district doesn't reject it? Or is it not even we don't even have to put that?
I wouldn't think so, and I would add too. It's not necessarily a request. It should be just a notification to your dean.
Yeah.
Like on the screen there. I'll be on personal business leave on this day for self-care. I'll meet all my professional obligations and make sure the students get their content. That's all I would suggest is necessary. And if they deny it after that, then we would have a problem with that.
Yep.
Okay,
So-
sounds good.
So Michael and Bill, I feel like I'm giving you homework and it makes me feel bad, but
No, don't feel bad. That's
Okay.
these things can be complicated, and sometimes the strict language of the contract does not answer every question. So having these examples to think about is important.
yeah, I think if people, in our unique world of dental, if you're taking personal business, it's coming up or whatever, and you're responsible for making up what you would have been doing with your students that day, it doesn't harm the team or the students. And it seems like that's where we're at, but I just want to make sure that that's okay to run the program that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And Melissa, if you have it, there's many nuances that probably affect other faculty too. And for my labs in particular, is what I'm thinking of. Not quite as stringent, I think, for accreditation purposes, but and this is what we like to do is help faculty and figure out the contract.
Yeah, I think it's great. Like when I used to teach a class and it was just by myself, it's easy to, when you're gone sick, you can figure yourself out and make it up and make sure the students are successful. But when it's team taught and you have all these moving parts, is it okay just to say, okay, if you're gone on personal business, you can't find a sub, then whatever you would have been done on that day,
Right.
make it up, figure it out, and we move on.
Yep. Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've discovered, I've been here 9 months now. I sort of assumed, especially looking at the contract, that things like leaves, the thing that Katie mentioned just a few minutes ago of who fills out your absence report, which Bill started the whole presentation with, I sort of blithely and naively assumed there would be a consistent system of working that across the district, that everyone would do exactly the same thing. And I very quickly found out that that was not the case, that there are some places where the administrators and the deans just fill out the absence report for you, others where they ask the faculty to do it. There's no, and for the union, that makes things a little bit difficult sometimes. On the one hand, sometimes having consistency makes everybody's life easier, right? If everyone follows exactly the same set of rules. On the other, the colleges are not all identical. They're different sizes. They have different types. So in some cases, some have programs that others don't have. And just the personalities too, and the organizations sometimes are different. And so sometimes it makes sense for them to do things in ways that are peculiar to that college. And it's just one of the challenges of working in a multi-college district.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for all this great information. It's wonderful to see you, Bill. I miss you guys in science.
Wonderful to see you, Melissa.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Any other questions, comments?
I'll look into that question, those questions that she was asking about labs and personal business and what do you do if you need to conform to a certain number of hours and make things up. I think that's worth us understanding.
Lori, you have a question or a comment?
We can't hear you, Lori.
Yeah, I can't hear you. Well, it doesn't look like she's muted.
No, that's why I was saying now she's muted.
Right.
Might be a microphone problem.
Yeah.
Yes, microphone issue. It's in the chat.
No, feel free to post in the chat, although. When will the recording be available? That's usually within a week. I think Rebecca's recording it, but she would know.
Yeah, so we could technically send it out today, but we will probably do it early in the week. We'll just email it out.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks
Yeah.
for doing that, Rebecca.
All right. Looks
If
like
there,
we're, yeah.
if there are no other questions, then maybe we'll wrap up. That sound good, everybody? Michael?
Yeah,
Rebecca? Yep.
absolutely. And thanks to our ASL interpreters too. It was great having you. And
Yes.
it's always excellent to have interpretation services for our faculty.
It is. Thank you both. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for coming out and hope to see you all soon.
Right. Take it easy, folks. Bye-bye.
Yep.